Cool. So here we are. Welcome. My name is Steve Diggs. I'm with Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and I'm also this year's Data Stewardship Chair. And I give my deepest thanks to Daniel Sagesiman for his assistance as our ESIP Fellow. We have a number of other ESIP Fellows in the room, and I'm giving this presentation along with Shana Solis of Navteca and Voice Atlas. And so without further ado, let's get underway. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to keep it pretty light and informal. Hopefully you have come ready to participate in this little experiment. So this very much is an experiment. We'll go through with a few introductions about what we're going to talk about today, and then Shana's going to give a pretty thorough covering of the technology that we're talking about today. So this is natural language processing and AI for science broadly, but really we're going to veer very strongly toward communication and dissemination of information of all sorts. We're going to use ESA's or ESIP's collaboration areas as our test bed. So almost everybody in the room, we wanted to find something common. Everybody in the room is involved with some collaboration area. So that'll be, we'll be handing it over to Shannon, and she'll be screen sharing from there. So if there is a problem, I have a lot of hands in the room that can help me. And then we have an interactive workshop for 15 minutes where each of you will have to answer some questions, but we're going to constrain your lane to how you can answer the question. And so that's everybody. And then Shannon's going to come back and give a demo and show you some of the ways, what goes on behind the scenes along with the analytics. And then we'll have a Q&A session. And of course, you have to have your call to action, something that keeps you engaged throughout the week. At any point, raise your hand. If you're online, utilize the chat. Questions, questions, questions. This is an interactive session. And it's the end of the day, so. All right, so I borrowed Susan Shingeldecker's slides just to make a point here. So this is the official view of the collaboration areas, and that's data stewardship there as one of the standing committees. So you can see there's, what, Megan, 30 collaboration areas now? So there's plenty of collaboration areas with everybody working on siloed and overlapping projects. And so the goal is to know what everyone is doing within ESIP. A few years ago in 2018, there was probably half or less of the number of clusters and collaboration areas. So it's gotten a lot harder across the landscape just within ESIP to know what's going on. This is our vision and the About Us that I just scraped right out of our wiki page. And the reason that I did that was to underline the importance of having this information available so other people know what you do. Now, this hasn't been updated in a long time. Daniel and I have been busy doing many, many other things. And then one of the things we didn't do, just like everyone else, is we didn't update our collaboration area common information page. And that's something we want to tackle. So if you want to look at that page, the URL is at the bottom of the slide. So among the many things that the clusters are responsible for, in addition to the telecons and being at the ESIP meetings, is developing these outputs and maintaining the resources. One of the resources we want to focus on, again, is that common information page for each collaboration area, and of course, lead open discussions. This is much better if you're paying attention to it. I've spoken to a number of other collaboration area leaders, and we all agree it's just something we keep overlooking because we already know the information and we can operate month to month without updating it. So one of the chair responsibilities, of course, is to keep that online presence up to date. And again, not to bring too fine a point, but that's something we want to focus on today. And the way that we do it is through the wonderful and often loved wiki page. Right? It's so easy to edit and everybody knows how to reach it. So it's super easy. I'm just kidding. No, it's not. And so we want to find a way to tap into that as information, to put that in natural language processing so that one can simply ask a natural language question. You might imagine doing it with Siri or Alexa, and getting an answer. And think about the web structure that you have to go through. Megan and Allison and I were just having this conversation. If you're constructing a web page for general dissemination of knowledge, you're assuming you know how people search for information, and you do the hierarchical structure that way. But what if you want to be able to bypass that? So some people utilize search engines that can do it, but they don't do a very good job because of the way the information is structured. So there's often misses. Speaking of missing information, what if every time somebody came to your web page and asked a question or searched for information and didn't find it, you would know about it and could adjust your web page in real time? So that's what we're talking about today. All right, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop sharing, hopefully if I can get this right, and then hand it over to Shana. Shana, you have it.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody. I can't see you, so that's kind of weird, but thank you so much. I was hoping to be there in person, and unfortunately, due to a COVID infection, I can't join you there today, but we'll try and get through this.
Everybody say hi to Shana.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody.
All right, you got it.
Thank you, Steve. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So as Steve, talked about in the introduction, we're talking today about conversational AI and natural language processing, which is a subset of artificial intelligence, and really looking at what are some of the use cases for science. And some of you, may know me from past ESIPs. You've probably seen me running around with a VR headset at Navteca. I'm the co-founder and CEO. We look at a lot of different types of emerging technologies, and we're very interested in human-computer interfaces, really, whether that's visualization or natural language, gestures, really looking at what are the future ways that we are going to be interacting with computers and with information and with data. And all of that really converges at some point. Right now we think of them as maybe disparate technologies, and we see that eventually coming together. The Holy Grail is, you've seen it in Minority Report and some of these movies where, you can just ask your room a question and get an answer out of thin air, pull a visualization and interact with it. So all of these things do eventually come together. So first, let's talk a little bit about the technology itself. You've probably used this and maybe didn't even realize it. So what's different about natural language from the way that we traditionally have searched for information? Well, the main thing is metadata tags and keywords. So traditionally, if you were looking for information about the recent heat wave, for example, in Google, you would just type in heat wave Texas, heat wave Europe, and those metadata tags, those keywords would get you the information. More and more though, and over 50% of searches, people are actually using natural language. They are speaking a question, whether it's voice to text into a mobile phone, or just asking a question rather than putting in those keywords. And there's an important distinction there. It's very important to understand and has real implications for science, is that there's a gap between the way that we speak and the way that data and information is tagged. So if I ask Google the question, does NASA have heat wave data? It's actually, able to now process that. It's using natural language processing to understand that question and give me some decent results. So it's not looking for does and have and data as keywords. It's understanding that this is a question and interpreting that. Now, unfortunately, if I go to a NASA website, this is not to knock NASA in any way, we're very close collaborators, so I would never do that. but it's simply to illustrate the point that when I look for that keyword in this repository of information, I'm not getting any results, because heat wave is not the way that scientific teams have tagged their data. Now, because I work with these groups a lot and I know, how they might typically use that, if I look for a temperature anomaly, all of a sudden I get tons of results. So you can see here, there's a gap between natural language and the metadata tags and keywords that would be used in order to access that information. And if you aren't part of the science community, maybe you don't necessarily know exactly what you need to look for in order to find that result. And we do know that people are using natural language already all the time, whether that's Siri, Alexa, Google. This is something that has now become part of our lives. We expect to be able to ask a question and get an answer. And there's a real gap, though, in terms of being able to get information that's very specific and relevant. Can you get information just about ESIP? Can you get information just about NASA? If you ask Siri a question, it's just going to go out to the internet and look for an answer. So it's not necessarily going to be able to find that needle in a haystack of that specific thing that you're looking for. And we know that people just want answers to questions. We don't have long attention spans. We don't like having to go through 10 different click sequences to find information on a website. The information is out there. It's buried in my email. I need to figure out, how do I log into ESIP today? And it took me a long time to actually figure it out. I couldn't just ask the question and get an answer. It took a lot of searching through that information. And what invariably happens, I don't know if this happens at your organization, but it certainly happens to us internally at NAPTUCA, and I see it happening at NASA all the time, is that people bypass the website, they bypass the internal SharePoint, and they just, text somebody, or they reach out on Microsoft Teams or Slack and ask a question, because we want that answer immediately. We don't have the time or the bandwidth to go out and look for it. And this can be a real drain then on the staff or the community or the people who then are those gurus, the go-to person who's always having to answer the questions. So today we're going to be talking about how we can automate that and how we can use artificial intelligence to really try to bridge that gap. For science, we know this is really important, right? Science is not accomplished without communicating. We need to be able to collaborate. We need to be able to share. The data and information that is out there might reside in so many different places that we don't necessarily have a good way to connect the dots. And the more people who are talking about open science, the more we need to really think about open access to information. Not knowing who to ask is very important. If we can eliminate that barrier, then we all of a sudden open up this information to diverse audiences, to people who don't necessarily know somebody at USGS or NOAA or Scripps, or they don't know who to ask. So if we can make that information available to them in a format using natural language, then all of a sudden we've accomplished some of these mission goals. Because you don't know what you don't know. If I don't know the terminology temperature anomaly, then it turns out that that NASA website to me is meaningless. It didn't provide the information I was looking for. So this is one way, one tool that we can use to overcome that obstacle. And this is really the gap that we were addressing when we decided to create a standalone product. We saw that people were using natural language, that this was a real industry trend, but there wasn't an easy way to quickly create a centralized knowledge base. Again, I don't want to go out to the internet and look for information about the ESIP, summer meeting. I want to be able to pull from it from ESIP, from this centralized knowledge. So being able to create a way to quickly and easily put that together without having to know anything about AI, don't have to train a model, don't have to have that technical expertise. So we created a system that uses text and voice-based bots and quickly and easily allows you to utilize AI, utilize NLP without needing any of that sort of background in creating this. And for science specifically, we're really seeing that it can help to accelerate research and development. Giving access to information can help increase productivity instead of having to look through everything, know who's the right person to ask, being able to just ask that question and get an answer, which also leads to improved user interactions. People are happier when they can just go to work, do their research, do their science, and not have to waste as much time. So I want to talk to you about some specific use cases. Initially, when we started creating and testing Voice Atlas, we needed a public-facing website to really test it out. Some of you may know that I had started Climate Warrior Collective, a nonprofit, a couple of years ago, and we actually had done some cool things with ESIP. So this was a great place to be able to test out Voice Atlas. And we decided to do so using a chatbot, which we call Chatless, and put it on the Climate Warrior Collective main site. And initially, when we set this up, we really just included information about Climate Warrior Collective, sort of the who, what, when, where, why. But as you know, there's all kinds of people out there who are doubting climate change. This is something that you can really fall down an internet hole, which I did in preparing for this talk. Of when you put in that question into search engines, you very quickly see the depth of misinformation that's out there. And natural language processing is one way to really be able to utilize AI to help combat that, to really have vetted information from trusted sources in that conversational format that people are looking for. So for this use case, again, when we originally set up the experiment, we had that sort of frequently asked question mentality of enabling the information from the website. And we were able to quickly create that knowledge base. And we have a little playground, you can test it out. And we were able to get really great answers, literally within minutes, just getting that set up. Then something interesting happened. Through the analytics that we have in the platform, we were actually able to see that we were kind of missing an important element, which is that people were asking questions that we didn't anticipate. And Steve alluded to this, and we're going to show this also in the live demo, is that the statistics provide really valuable insight to be able to understand how people are interacting with the content, that they're asking questions that are not necessarily being answered. And that's the gold, that's the aha moment, because in the science community, that's what we're all concerned about, is providing information and answers and useful, actionable things. So really being able to have that insight is key. And what we found from looking at these analytics was something really crazy. People were coming to the Climate Warrior site and they were asking, is climate change a hoax? This was really surprising to me, but we were able to see that through the analytics. It was showing up, several different times. And so that, again, was the light bulb that we needed to realize, wow, we are missing an opportunity with Climate Warrior Collective, with our site, not just to talk about us as an organization, but to actually provide meaningful and vetted information about climate change. We can actually combat some of the misinformation that's out there by being a real source of information. We can link to places that we know are trusted resources for information. So we were able to take this head on and really come up with answers to these type of questions. It took some tweaking and going back and forth, but really being able to address that. So now when you go to the website and type in that question, then you can get an answer. And deploying the bots are very, very easy. Again, we can kind of show you this in the live demo. You'll see that this is literally just copying and pasting a code snippet. And for the scientists and the researchers, we allow you to do this in Jupyter notebooks as well. So we've gotten really great responses on that from scientists who are actually very excited about being able to deploy a chatbot into a Jupyter notebook. And then it's providing that natural language interface just within the content of that notebook, and being able to ask questions and get answers. Also providing insight back to the scientists about how people are interacting with the information, and again, what might be missing. So for the Climate Warrior site, once we were able to address that missing content, now you can see that we get an answer for climate change that it's not a hoax, and providing information back to a visitor about that. We did a lot of repeated testing with middle school audiences to, really, again, kind of dive into how people are using this particular site. And the metrics were invaluable because we saw that, again, there was information that we couldn't have anticipated. The really cool thing about the AI, though, is that it will make inferences. So even if you don't have a specific answer about something, it will do its best to provide something that's useful and relevant. So it was really interesting to see answers to these types of questions. Is it too late to do something about climate change? Is there any hope for us? Those weren't questions that we had anticipated, but the bot, I thought, did a really great job of coming up with something that was still relevant and was a decent answer. So for science, we're seeing a number of different ways that this can be used. Obviously, that was more of the education and outreach use case, but there's lots of complex ways that NLP can be used as well. We can use it to connect the dots. We can really connect multiple locations and repositories of information to make it easier to find that answer, centralizing the information and using natural language as a way to access it. You don't have to put in information manually. You can use an API, so you can make the ingest of information automated, which is great because, again, what Steve was talking about is, it's cumbersome to have to constantly be keeping your information up to date. If you can just do it in one place and then via API pull from that, it's preferable. The AI ML also will give relevant answers, whether your data is structured or unstructured. So you don't have to, come up with a whole list of FAQ type questions. You can literally copy and paste an about us type paragraph and be able to start interacting with the information. Again, including Jupyter Notebooks content. So it's just going to pull from that specific source of information. And then knowing what questions are being asked and answered does provide really interesting insights, whether it's internal use cases or public-facing use cases. So to give you an example of that, one project that we've been working on with NASA, with the Applied Sciences Disaster Applications Group, has been to enable Voice Atlas on one of their public-facing portals. This is a geospatial information portal that provides information to many different types of stakeholder groups who don't necessarily have a science background. People who are looking for information about disasters like earthquakes, fires, floods, landslides. They may be coming from state and local government. They may be coming from the Red Cross, from other international groups even. And so providing information to them in a way, again, that uses conversational language versus metadata tags and keywords was of particular interest to the program manager. And in this case, we had a hybrid approach of using both the API to bring in the dynamic information from the live events, as well as information from the Applied Sciences mission website, which was, again, somewhat confusing to users that there were 3 different places to access information about NASA disasters, and they weren't centralized. So Voice Atlas could be that unifying way for people to interact with information that is normally stored in many different places. And this is something that we see, as the future for how people will interact with information. Being able to use NLP as a way to bridge that gap is probably, again, the future in terms of the way that people will expect to interact with information. Another use case I wanted to share with you, because it's quite different, is for the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory. And they wanted to use Voice Atlas really differently. They wanted to use it more as a virtual lab assistant, almost like a virtual research librarian. So when you go on site to the lab, they have a huge area with almost like a maker space with lots of different things that you can try out, emerging technology, whether it's AR, VR, 3D printers, laser machines, all kinds of really cool stuff. And they have staffing issues. The lab is open 24/7, prototyping and internal projects, but it's not staffed as such. So they were really excited to use conversational AI and our technology to really do some experimenting about could they provide better support to their user community and actually using it with a smart speaker. So this can be deployed not just as a text-based bot, as we saw with the other use case, but actually also via voice and smart speakers. The results that we're getting, I think, speak for themselves. They are being able to, in all of these use cases, we're improving the way that information can be attained in a complex environment. We're definitely improving the use of staff time. That's something that we're hearing over and over again, is that it's really cutting down on the amount of repetitive questions that get asked over and over again. And it has multiple uses. So it's not just one thing. It can be used many different ways, both internally and externally. Getting that information out of silos and really making the knowledge interactive again. So we are seeing that people are really leaning into the analytics. As I showed with Climate Warrior Collective, that gives you valuable information and insight. And so it makes it much more interactive. In real time, you can keep that information up to date. The virtual lab assistant is improving the staff productivity so that they can be available for the hard to ask questions versus having to constantly address the same thing over and over. And certainly some of those open science and diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals that everybody's talking about are actually being dealt with. This is a real world implication, real world result of being able to say, yes, I'm making my information more accessible. I'm making my information more open. I'm making my information more equitable. Some of the other benefits, we've talked a little bit about them, certainly the Jupyter Notebook support, being able to bring in that information through bulk import or API is huge in terms of an automation value proposition. We also see that with machine learning, things improve over time. So as the audience engagement increases, then the bot gets better, it gets smarter, and you see that reflected in the answers. Even just having this information available, 24/7 all the time, for some organizations, that in itself is an improvement. We can certainly brainstorm some of the, ideas that we've had for ESEP and for the science community, but being able to put information out there in a way that's interactive, outside of just your typical twice-a-year meetings, could be very, very exciting. So I'm going to end my sort of official presentation here and pause and maybe take some of your questions before we jump into our interactive workshop and the actual demo of how this all works. Thank you. Steve, I can't hear you. I think you're muted for the online people.
Now you should be able to hear me.
Yeah.
There. I can tell that's Shayna's gratified face. So she's very happy with if I'm translating. So any questions? Yes. Miranda? Oh, we have a mic. Yes. It's coming.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I guess I had two questions, if that's okay. The first is just more, what exactly did you mean when you said that you tweaked how the chatbot answered? What exactly did that involve? And then my second question was just, why did you specifically choose Voice Atlas as opposed to some other software, especially since it costs money? I was just wondering if you think that there's value there.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of tweaking the answer for the "Is climate change a hoax?", this was actually really interesting because initially when the question got asked, the AI was answering in a way that almost sounded like a climate denier. So the answer that it was giving was, it was pulling from some information in the knowledge base, and it was saying, Earth's climate has always, has changed over time, and it wasn't wrong, But the way that it was just pulling out that one paragraph, again, it almost sounded like a climate denier because it was just making it sound like, well, Earth's climate has always changed. So the way that we had to tweak that was actually adding in a specific sentence that said, climate change is real, it is not a hoax, semicolon, Earth, even though Earth's climate has changed over time, human activities, are definitely contributing to that. The scientific consensus is, 1, 2, 3, X, Y, Z. So it was, again, thinking about the natural language and really thinking about how would I answer this question if somebody was asking it to me. And so that's something that we've also seen with some of these other use cases, is sometimes the information is in an Excel spreadsheet or it's in a PDF format, but it's not necessarily written in a way that the NLP can understand it. And so we have to sometimes add in some of that natural language. Another example, just to illustrate that, was Steve and I were putting together a little test demo atlas for today's presentation. And I copied and pasted the information about ESIP summer meeting into an item. And when I was asking questions in the voice atlas, just the playground environment, it wasn't necessarily giving me the answer. And so I had to go back and add a little bit of natural language. So it was the dates and times and location for the summer meeting. I had to add in a sentence that said, ESIP summer meeting is taking place in Pittsburgh on July 18th through 22nd. And that fixed the problem. So hopefully that answers your question. The second question that you asked, Navteca is actually the creator of Voice Atlas. This is our product. So similarly, if you go to a session with Esri, they'll talk about ArcGIS, which is their product. This is our product. So we did do a lot of market research ahead of time and saw that there weren't other great solutions that made it very easy to create a knowledge base. There's lots of building blocks out there. Even, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, there's lots of tools out there, but it literally would take, years and a lot of knowledge and expertise with AI to train the models. So we wanted to make that really easy. So you didn't have to have any of that type of very specialized background to be able to utilize NLP. But that's why we're using Voice Atlas.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
We have another question.
So a couple of questions. Thanks. That's a really interesting answer that you gave just now. One of the enduring problems of chatbots is they tend to be racist and ugly if you don't carefully monitor them. And also because a lot of chatbot development is actually transfer learning. So you're actually working off of models that are based on just the language that's out there, and then you train it on domains. I don't know how you consider how you have to retrain your application over and over again to be able to catch some of these problems. So it's not just a one-time thing, you have to do it over and over again. So that's one question. And another question is that studies have shown that when people know they're talking to chatbots, they simplify their questions, so it actually alters the way they ask things. And I'm wondering if you've caught any of that and how you might deal with it.
Yeah, those are definitely great comments and questions. So for your first question about bias in artificial intelligence, you're absolutely right. And this is something that's definitely known in the industry. And I'm going to show you in the live demo one of the ways that we combat that. But you're right that it is an ongoing system that has to be monitored. This isn't a set it and forget it type of technology. And to really get the most out of the NLP, you really would want to build in a workflow where you have someone or multiple people who are going to be responsible for really monitoring how the bot is doing and what the interactions are. And I'll show you what that looks like. But that's a really great point, that this is not something that, requires absolutely no human interaction or human supervision. And your second question, please remind me what it was.
The second question is about how people change
Yes.
the questions they ask
Simplicity.
when they learn that they're talking to a chatbot. And this can be, you manage with the climate change a hoax issue, but what you can lose is people reflecting and trying to grapple with this, and this more nuanced conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the technology is ever evolving. So I think, again, with machine learning, you definitely see systems that get smarter over time and are capable of very nuanced conversation. I think what we are really trying to approach is bridging the gap between lots of different types of language. So I gave the example early on between heat wave and temperature anomaly. And we see this over and over again. We saw this for the NASA disaster applications use case, which is that you have one type of terminology that's used in the science and research community, and another type of terminology that's used more by the average lay person. So for example, when we're looking at rainfall, that data is typically tagged as precipitation. And somebody from, the community, even, somebody who's coming from more of like the NOAA type environment might be looking for rainfall versus precipitation. We had a NASA group that was looking for information that they knew existed. This is again that example, like the information is there, and it's just frustrating because you can't find it. This was an education and outreach team that was looking for information that they wanted to use for a Hyperwell presentation, and it was about a study that NASA had done with cloud computing to count every tree on Earth using AWS cloud, and they couldn't find the information even though they knew it was there. Well, it turns out the team, they were looking for trees, and the data, turns out, was tagged as vegetation. So it seems simple, but we just see this over and over again, where there's a real disconnect in the language that's used in the metadata terminology and the keywords, and then the way that somebody might ask that question, using different terminology. Hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, other questions, either online or in the room? All right. So we're going to switch back. Absolutely. You do that. I'll run the mic.
Hi, I'm Colette. Thank you so much. This was so awesome to see, and I feel like you made something really complex very easy to understand. I'm curious, as we run into today being a great example in the UK, like very unprecedented changes or like things that we previously haven't seen, how this software interacts with or like deals with new and unseen linkages, and if you've even had the chance to explore that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really makes the point for using API to bring, to ingest the information in some sort of automatic way, so that as new events occur, as new information becomes available, then it becomes part of the NLP knowledge base that it would be pulling from. So it's absolutely possible, using the current technology to do that. It's just really up to you as the Atlas owner, Atlas creator, to decide what information you want to use as your knowledge base. So actually, Steve, should I switch to the demo now and show them that? Or are we doing the interaction thing first?
Can I share the screen now?
I think we're going to go interactive first, just to drive the point home. And
Okay, I will come back to that and show you that when we look at the back end, because we're going to show you, basically creating the knowledge base, how you can use either API or manual items, the analytics and how you get insight and like how you tweak how something responds, and then the integrations and how you can set this up. So you can use the same knowledge base in many different places. You can use it as a chatbot. Obviously, we just saw that on a website. You can also use it in a Slack channel, Microsoft Teams, Facebook Messenger. So we're trying to think about the ways that people already access information. We don't want to make something new. It's not a new app to download. It's not a new thing to install. It's just already there. So if like at NAVTECA internally, we're a very tiny company, by the way. We use Slack for internal communications, and we have a little chatbot set up with questions about HR. So it's been super useful even for myself. I was at the dentist and I didn't have our, dental insurance number or whatever. Instead of having to call Christina, our assistant, we literally only have one person in the company who handles all these things. I didn't have to call her and bug her. I just asked in my little Slack chatbot and there was information. It's been very useful for all kinds of things.
All right. Thanks, Shana. We're going to give Shana a break. She's recently back up vertical from the sick bed. So I'm really grateful that she has elected to put time and energy into being here today. So the workshop time, we'll drive the point home about using websites to find information, whether they're data or it's information about information. And we'll use something that we're all familiar with, the ESIP website. And this isn't a criticism of the ESIP website. It actually is a very good website, and it contains all the information about the meeting we're in, all of the collaboration areas, all of the officers, and even how ESIP is structured and funded. But we're going to, only using the ESIP website, we're going to try to answer the following 3 questions. What is an ESIP cluster? How do I get involved in ESIP? What is the history of ESIP? So these are things that some of us think we know that should be relatively easy, but think of the newcomers meeting when they don't know anything, and they're trying to make the decision about coming to ESIP at all. So if you have a phone or a computer, and then you can just raise your hand when you're done. Staff and ESIP fellows are excluded from this competition. Okay, so we're going to give it about 10 minutes, and when you're done, and then I want to ask you about the experience of navigating to get this information and how you did it. Okay, so you have about 10 minutes, have at it. And if you have any questions, raise your hand or just ask. We should be playing some music or something right now, right? There we go. Designated whistle. Somebody busts out a harmonica, I'm gonna lose it. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the bonus question is, if you're unfamiliar with a particular cluster or collaboration area, you can find information that satisfies you on that, and those are your bonus points. There's also the thing that if you don't know where you should start on the webpage, just raise your hand. I'll help you navigate, because that's really tech enabled when you ask people, how do I navigate a webpage? Really, nobody's raised their hand yet? Then nobody's, oh, you're done, okay. Yeah, just raise your hand when you're done. I get an idea of who's been able to alone and work quietly and find all the information that you need.
Does it count if I actually had to use Google search engine to find the answer to these questions?
No, it doesn't count. You're only
My God.
Okay, now you have to confess to the people.
Okay, so I actually, because I could not, there, especially the history one. No, but it actually, yeah. Wait a minute, I'm not supposed to reveal.
No. But what I would like to point out is this is a different thing, way that when you're creating web content, two different people find one thing very easy to find, the other person finds it impossible, and neither person is wrong. Right? If you wanted to know, if you turned around to John and asked him, hey, what's the history of ESIP? He's going to tell you like that, because we have that sort of common interface. But when we're guessing and creating web content, we put things in silos, we put things in banners, and drop down menus, and we go, that's easy to find. I think it is. Because I think the way, I think the way John does, so it's good for two of them.
So this is my first day at an ESIP conference, and I could not find out the history question when I only used the site. And I actually found a URL that isn't physically mentioned on the ESIP site, and that gave the history.
So we call that the Kobayashi Maru. You know, if you can't solve the problem, you re-rig the game. That's right.
That's right. And the way I think happened to be perfectly in line with how the website was organized, and it took me one click. So, like Steve said, that doesn't make me right and you wrong or vice versa. It's just that we think and operate the website in different ways, and how we organize in our minds, we have different models for finding data.
And I should add that John and I, as longtime ESIP people, have been beaten to submission by the site. So we automatically, when we see the site, we know how to get information from it. Oh, anybody else want to share the experience of trying to answer those three questions or more, and how easy or hard or thoughts about it? Yeah. Hang on.
Hi, I use the ground rules, so I'm on the website. But I was able to get the 1, 2, and the what's in a cluster information. How do I get involved, and the history. Finding the bonus question to find out more information about the classes that you are not familiar with, it a little bit tough. I mean, I'm not saying tough. You told me I have 10 minutes. Maybe if I spend more than that, then I might be able to find that. But just wanted to share. I think there's information, this web page is catered to everyone. That's what I can feel. It's a plus thing, a plus sign, and it's not only for research community or an academics. I believe it will be easy because it has this general structure about news, event, resources. If you look at it any other in a website, in generally it has the same structure. One more thing that I find interesting is if you think about the semiotics aspect, icons, indices, it use less icons and index. So I find maybe, I don't know the intention when whoever created this website. Sometimes if you use a lot of semiotics like an icons, index, and symbols, it's difficult for accessibility people to understand. Maybe it's that's the reason that there's you don't see that much icons and symbols. So I believe it's a great thought they put it before they are implementing it. And so I didn't get the bonus question, but I found the other ones. I don't know, can I give a general overview about, did I answer your question? Yeah.
Let's not do that. We're in the middle of ESIP. We don't want to criticize their website. Maybe just a little. Anybody else? Yeah.
So there's a lot of information on the website. So it took me a while, but I was able to find all the information just by perusing the website. Number one is under Get Involved, Collaborate, about the ESIP cluster. How do I get involved? There's a section about getting involved right there. So you, as a participant or a partner. And then the third one, the history of ESIP, is under the About category. Details are there. And then there's a specific section in the cluster section about how you find more information about each cluster. So you I kind of have to be a little patient, but the information is there. It just depends on, you know, how much in a rush you are, how, you know, like, the information is there though.
So this is interesting because we have a variety of experiences. But one of the things that the web was designed to do was to find information quickly. And if you say, well, if I had another 10 minutes, do people really spend 10 minutes on a web page looking for a small piece of information? Or do they lose interest and go away? Or do they bump out and use Google, which gives you 39,000 responses in 0.3 milliseconds, right? And that doesn't help because they're not ranked in accordance with what you want. What you really want to do is if I want to ask Sarah about collaboration areas, and she tells me, oh, there's a marine data cluster. If you're in ocean sciences, you should probably connect with them. Done. So that network is fast, and I think, Shannon, are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready. Yeah, and there were a couple comments in the chat also similar to the people in the room that some people found it was pretty easy to find the information. Other people felt like it was not so easy. One person remarked that there's a search bar in the wiki page, and so that made it easier than from the main page where that search bar is really hidden. So similar, kind of a broad range of experience. And again, we didn't want to do this to criticize the website in any way. Right. It was really just to kind of illustrate the point that yes, the information is out there. We probably all deal with this on a daily basis. As you know, the information is on a site, on a SharePoint site, on a wiki page, somewhere buried in my email. But how long does it take to find that information? And are we putting this in a way that is then also open and accessible to others? So I'm going to share again.
Yeah, go ahead and share. I'm going to stop sharing here.
Okay.
You go ahead and share, and while you get ready to go, and we're talking about this, one of the reasons I'm looking at it, and if you go to our website, which John has done and criticized me often, is if you don't speak Expo code, you can't find any data. And so we're now with a website that's 20 years old, that initial generation who knew where all the expeditions were, they're gone. And the new people, the new early career scientists who are coming along are asking basic natural language questions like, was there a ship in this area that measured temperature? And it's yes or no. And if they do the temporal constraint and the spatial constraint, they should either get an answer or not an answer. And what you get is something that muddies the water instead, because we need you to speak our language before you can start to get data. And to bypass that is stop concentrating on the content of the website and more concentrate on the knowledge that's behind it in all of the metadata. So take it away, Shana.
Steve, do you see my voice atlas?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So just to kind of walk you all through the sort of behind the scenes a little bit, and also show you, we set up a test atlas. I can find my page. There we go. Steve, are you seeing the ESIP test site that we set up?
Yes, and
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to need you to answer the same 3 questions.
Yeah, okay, okay. So, and just to mix things up and to prove a point, I'm not going to ask the questions exactly the way you put them, Steve, to kind of show how NLP works. So I think your question was, what was the history of ESIP? I'm going to say, when was ESIP started? just ask the question differently. Okay, so here I get a paragraph. It was created by NASA in 1998. So you can see, when we use AI, we don't have to specifically ask a question in a specific way. These aren't question answer pairs. This is very open-ended. What is an ESIP cluster? Now, this is one that I think you guys did better on than I did when I was trying to find the information. Okay, so Voice Atlas is not finding an answer. And this is one that I struggled with on the ESIP website because the website calls them collaboration areas. And it wasn't clear that a cluster is a collaboration area, or at least for me. Maybe, again, we all think differently and the way we put together information is unique sometimes. So you can see it's not finding an answer. It is suggesting other things. So the AI is saying, all right, I don't know if I have a question answer to this, but I could, maybe there's something here. So it's directing me to that. And I want to show you on the back end what that looks like as well. And then what was the third question, Steve? I already forgot it. Sorry, my COVID brain. Oh, I remember. How do I get involved? Right?
I knew as soon as I stepped to the mic, you'd remember.
Sorry. How do I get involved? I do remember your middle name though. It's like weird. Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm getting a pretty decent answer from the AI, and you'll see that we can also have links. So this can, take me directly to creating an email and take me directly to a site. So the NLP can really function as that virtual assistant, that virtual librarian, that, imagine going into a place where there's an information kiosk, whether, like you go in a museum or airport, you have no idea where you need to go to find something. So the NLP can really be that gatekeeper. It's just this one-stop shop of like, okay, I need to find something. Instead of having to click around all over the place, this can then send me in the right direction. So on the back end, I'm gonna open my Atlas, and these are all collaborative. So I threw this together this morning really quickly and shared it with Steve. This is just a very basic and rudimentary application of the technology. It can be much more complex. So we have these different items. These were just kind of copied and pasted into this. We could import items. They don't have to be done manually. And so that makes it a lot easier. We can do a bulk import. We can also connect via API. That goes back to one of the questions earlier about how do you deal with real-time information, especially in a world where things change quickly. That's important. With COVID protocols, for example, I know for a while, things were changing every day. Do I need a mask? Do I not need a mask? Am I allowed to go on site? Am I not? All of these things were changing. So NASA, for example, was sending out these like PDF flyers, and it had all kinds of information for 10 different centers. Some were at, they had a color system. And I kept thinking, if they had, Voice Atlas or something similar, it would be so great, because I don't know what orange means. What are the parameters around orange in terms of being able to go on lab and meet with people and things of that nature. So the API can be really useful for that, of just making sure that you have up-to-date information available to people. For testing out the items, we have a playground here, so you can, ask something and see how the bot responds. So this was the example I gave from the Climate Warrior site, is how we tweaked the information around this climate change, a hoax. So if we go to our test site, let's ask it a couple more questions and see how the bot does, and maybe show you how that gets tweaked. So how do I join ESIP? Let's see. Okay, so it's answering this question. How do I join ESIP? Partnership benefits, becoming a partner. Okay, so this answer is interesting. This is good. It's not actually giving me like a next step. So if I wanted to, provide this as an actual useful tool to people, I think I'd want them to have a link of like, not just, the partnership benefits, but like get them to the next thing so that we don't want to frustrate people and send them back if they don't know where to go. So if I go back to Voice Atlas on the back end, I know that information, because I set this up again a couple hours ago, this information is in a different item. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm going to add this to becoming a partner so that I make sure that that link is there. So now I have a link to an email and a link to the place on the website to actually do this. Okay, so I saved it. Now let's go back to our live site. And again, Steve could share the URL with this. You could pull it up on your phones or your computers and see this isn't smoke and mirrors, it's real time. So now I'm going to ask that same question of how do I join ESIP? And there's my link. So you can see this, right away. It just took me 30 seconds to add that information. Now, when I click this, it's a live link. It takes me to the actual place on the site to get this information. So these are pretty simplistic uses, right? It's like FAQs and site navigation. But now imagine this for science. Imagine this for accessing information about data holdings. Do you have information about climate data for the South Pacific? Instead of just getting, thousands of hits back, the AI could actually help you to navigate and really find, a specific information repository that maybe you didn't even know existed. Maybe you didn't know that ESA is doing, has been doing studies on something that's relevant to you. So really making that information more discoverable is, hopefully what we can get you to think about today. So it's, of course, the sort of simple use case, like helping people figure things out and where to go and how to find the information. But what more could you do with it in terms of making that data open and accessible? And then I want to show you also the analytics, because I talked about that a lot in the presentation. So I want to just kind of show you that and how we get insight. So this is our ESIP test atlas. The analytics update every hour. So we get, again, real-time information. And this is, again, kind of going back to somebody's question and comment about, well, you have to monitor AI. You can't just leave it alone and let it do its thing. And that is very true. We also can set the personality of the AI. So, Voice Atlas out of the box is supposed to be very personable. It's not going to swear at you, for example. It's not going to be rude. If you ask it a rude question, it comes up with some answers that are very neutral. And, that's done purposefully. Believe it or not, you can give AI different personalities. So we go for pleasant. So in the metrics, we can see summarized, by question. And these are the things that are being answered correctly. So we can get a sense of, again, just in a few minutes of setting up some basic information, it's able to answer all these questions. We can get a sense of things that it didn't answer correctly. So this is where that insight would come in. And I'll show you, for example, on the climate warrior one, being able to see like, okay, maybe there's some things in here that we need to add. If this was a truly public facing site, this is something that we would want, at least weekly to have somebody looking at. But that somebody doesn't need to be an AI expert. They don't need to be a system administrator. They don't need to be some sort of highly paid technical person. This could be, a comms person. It could even be an intern. We've had interns at NAVTECA who are monitoring different atlases and are doing a great job with this. You can also download all the raw data. So if you really wanted to go crazy and do more analytics, you have access to all of that. And that's, every interaction with the AI. And then I mentioned the different integrations. We try to make it really easy to set this up again in environments where people are already congregating and already going to communicate and look for answers for things. The chat list is our chatbot. So I had showed you that it can be integrated with a website and also Jupyter Notebooks. And we've also seen this used a lot for training and webinars. So you can enable this in a Zoom chat. And we're looking at some of the other popular video conferencing tools of being able to enable this in a chat. And that makes it really interesting because you can kind of anticipate what a lot of your frequently asked questions are. Or like we had somebody using it for a webinar where there was going to be like ongoing homework and things like that. And it was great because the participants could say like, where's the link for the homework? Or where do I turn things in? And all of that was automated. And so then it opened up the Q&A for the instructor. Instead of having to waste their time on those kind of basic questions, they had time to actually really get into much more of the, the hard questions that, weren't necessarily something the AI could answer. And then also that instructor has all of the analytics after the fact. So they have a real record of the questions that were being asked and answered. And again, hopefully that gives them insight into, how to improve the content as well. So I'll show you this in a different atlas, just to kind of show you another example of this. So if we look at the climate warrior atlas, these are all of the different items that we have at this point. So again, we made it much more robust after the testing and realizing that we needed to add more information about climate change and not just about the organization. So we can see in the analytics, we're getting a lot of questions about like, how do people get shirts and merch? And then this is really important because I'm seeing that there's questions about events and like, how do I join? And so that's something really important to know is that if people are asking questions, that's pretty critical if it's not answering about like, how do I join? Or what are your upcoming events? And that's something critical that we're missing and should add that information in. And that would be, really easy to do either manually through opening up, one of these items. So I could, do that in the playground and see how it responds. Or I could go to my live site and see. So here it's saying, it's confirming what I already knew from the analytics is that it's not answering a question about upcoming events. Now the AI is prompting me to add an answer, which is great. So then I could literally just add something in here about events, and then this would become live immediately. So it's very easy to interact with this and add the information that's missing. And then we can see here, we'll go back to our test site for ESIP. If we wanted to, we can enable this for all of the different clusters. This was something that Steve and I were realizing, from looking through the wiki, that a lot of the wiki pages were not very updated. They kind of stopped, some of them around 2018, 2019. And this is important for organizations to have, better record of what's been done. For example, I used to co-lead a cluster on VR, AR, and XR, and I realized that's kind of been lost. We had a metaverse, meta-earth session earlier today, and somebody remarked that it was like the first one at ESIP, and I thought, no, it's definitely not. We've definitely, worked on this before, but it's true that that information isn't captured anywhere, and it's kind of been lost if you weren't involved and you didn't know about it. So, potentially this is a technology that can help to really enable institutional knowledge as well. Because, Steve mentioned, people retire, they move on. And so how can we better, as a science community, document and capture that and make it accessible for the people who come after us? This could potentially be one way to do that.
And Shannon, we would take time for a few questions that may have come up. Oh yeah, people are enthusiastically, you can see that hands are up. Okay. Hang on.
Thank you. This is Daniel, one of the ESIP fellows, and I was just wondering, how does this, sorry, I need to pull my, I don't want to hear my own voice. All right. So how does it handle things that are recurring events like that are contained within widgets or apps on the website, such as the community calendar? So if I wanted to ask, when is the next data stewardship telecon? Would it be able to read that information off of the calendar?
Yeah, all of that can be customized. So the answer is yes, those, you know, can definitely be done through custom integration and configuring it to interact with other applications. If the application already has an API, it's easier. If it doesn't, it can be done through custom development. So it's not necessarily like a one-click out of the box type thing, but yeah, it can absolutely do that. We did an early test case also with NASA for their conferencing systems at NASA headquarters. Why have one conferencing scheduler when you can have two? And it was causing a lot of conflict because you wouldn't necessarily know that a room was reserved. And, you know, they were even having issues like the NASA administrator and other, you know, very high up people having people conflict with their conference rooms. So we did some very early testing. This was before voice atlas and actually just using Amazon devices, but we were successful in getting NLP to integrate with the two different conference schedulers. So you could go in and ask the smart speaker, you know, is this room available? It could read both the systems, answer you back, you know, yes, would you like to schedule a meeting? You could say, you know, yes, I'd like to reserve this room. And then it would actually update the two conference scheduling systems. So then anybody who was checking them would then see that the room was no longer available. But that's all, you know, more on the custom development side.
That is really interesting. Thank you.
While the mic is going around, I had a guy that I worked with on one of my favorite pieces of web software, Kumu, and he said, well, we'll just schedule a meeting, just email my assistant. And her name is Amy Ingram. And so I said, hey, Amy, Jeff and I would like to get together. She's like, oh, what dates do you have free? Do you have a public calendar? Yeah, I have a public calendar. She goes, oh, I see you have these days free. I'm going to contact Jeff and see if you guys can't meet next Wednesday. And I was like, Jeff, Amy's great. I mean, every time I send her email, she responds. He goes, Amy's not a person. Amy's AI.
Wow.
Amy Ingram, get it? And so what Amy could do was modify his public Google Calendar, and you could see that integrating with this to both answer a question and schedule a meeting, so the information can go both ways. And that, I mean, for me, that was a moment that I had been chatting and been cordial with this artificial intelligence.
This is a very similar question. It sounds like you've got the NLP working on the query side, but not on the response side. That removes a ton of problems from the ugliness. On the other hand, it's a ton of work. So is that like 100% on the query side and 0 on the response side, or do you let the NLP play with the responses as well?
So the response is always going to pull from whatever knowledge base you have decided it should pull from. And we can do a lot to really reduce the amount of work to get something set up. So for example, we can scrape an entire website, and we did that for Applied Sciences, because again, they had information in multiple places, and a lot of their outside users were just going to the geospatial portal, and they didn't know that there were these other websites that they needed to go to get information or to sign up for a telecon, things like that. So we just scraped all of that information and put it into the knowledge base to help get that established. So we try to make it, you know, not a heavy lift. You know, we could take PDF files, we could take Excel spreadsheets, we could take web content. You know, obviously the information has to come from somewhere. So if the information literally just doesn't exist anywhere in a written format and it's inside people's heads, which you'd be surprised is sometimes the case, is that there isn't actually documentation, then, you know, that's also, that is something that we can't necessarily address, because somebody actually does have to do the work to create that documentation. But if it exists, we've gotten pretty good at trying to reduce the barrier to entry for people to just make it easy to get up and running.
And I'm going to give you my own experience as a newbie who was like expecting that, oh, I'll just put this in there and it'll be configured and the responses will be, really high level. And I think that Shana impressed upon me earlier that I had to be trained a little bit on how to put the information in there. So I was taking the information out of a site and putting it in and seeing what worked. And once I figured out kind of meeting it halfway what worked, it was very easy after that to just dump information in there. The big leap was, I think, in having, as you put it, 100% on one side and sort of 0 on the other, is it does take away a bunch of problems, A. And B, I think about it inserting things that I've always, as a person who is either completely developed a web environment or had a hand in it diminishing over time, how hard it is to get the human labor to put the information in the right places. Here, you can kind of flatten that and put the information in one place, and it sort of gets chosen for you based on the semantic content.
Also, I keep forgetting to mention my name. I'm Renee Sieber from McGill University.
Hi, Renee, nice to meet you.
There's a reason that she knows so much about this. Any other questions? Either online, oh yeah, we have a question.
Thank you. Hi, this is Hannah Collier with ORNL. And I'm sorry, you might have mentioned this, but how can you tell in the metrics if an interaction has failed? Does it just come up with nothing, or can you tell if it gave you the wrong answer?
Oh yeah, let me go back and show you that. So let's go to the analytics. So, we have it separated by interactions that it answered correctly with this very high-tech smiley face. There are successful answers, and then our very high-tech sad face gives us the failed answers. So we can see, here, for example, this question, any events coming up was the question, and the bot failed to answer that. If we wanted to download all of the raw data and really, really dive into that, we certainly could. We've seen for our users that this, by and large, is sufficient to have these summarized stats by question. I also told people not to worry about these percentages too much, like when it's saying, like 27% of questions were failed. Well, it depends on the volume of questions that you're getting. And this, again, is where your real gold, your insight is coming from the failed questions. If the bot's successful, then that's wonderful. And then the failed questions are where you really get that insight into what I need to add. So like if I go back to the ESIP one and show you the analytics from that, we can see that we're getting, a little over 20% failure rate. And if I go and look at what are the failed questions, how do I apply? How do I join a collaboration area? What are clusters? So again, if this was an actual, site, then this would be something to probably dive into. For the ESIP comms people, probably would be the ones who would be taking on the role of making sure the information was relevant and up to date, and making sure that maybe they want to add an item around, specifically what are clusters. And again, I found that confusing on the website because everybody calls them clusters, but the website calls them collaboration areas. So good job to all of you who found that information quickly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So my name's Ethan. I'm with the U.S. Geological Survey. It's really interesting, and I could see use cases with our group. But I was wondering, did your question get fully answered? Like what designates an answer as wrong? It just doesn't have any answer for it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So correct, the answer is designated as wrong if the bot just simply doesn't have anything. But there is a level, again, of necessitating human supervision of this, which is that you would really want to use the Atlas playground to see how the bot is answering things, because it might not come up as wrong if it thinks it had an answer. So my climate change hoax is a good example of that. The bot was answering, it wasn't coming up as a wrong answer, but the way that it was answering was not how Climate Warrior Collective wanted to portray that answer. It was giving an answer that didn't have the right nuance. And so through using the playground here was how we were able to tweak that and adjust the language. So that's where you do still want potentially to have that human oversight. So just to show you what that looks like, if I put in, is climate change real in my playground, I can then monitor and see how it's answering. So it's saying climate change is real, it is not a hoax. And here's where I was giving that example where we added the semicolon. Even though the Earth's climate has changed throughout history, modern human civilization has accelerated these changes. So this is how we were able to play around with it. Originally, it was just pulling this thing about Earth's climate has changed throughout history. And so it was giving the wrong impression. And then on the back end, we can literally review the answer that it's pulling from. So it makes it really easy to see, like, because especially if you have hundreds of items, you can be like, well, okay, where's the AI pulling this from? So now I can review this answer and see. Also, if I want to have this entire paragraph with the link, I can add questions in. So it's not necessary, but if you want to guide the AI, if I want to say, you know what, if somebody asks, is climate change real? I want this entire answer to show up. I can put this in here to guide the AI, and I'll show you what that looks like. So without having that in there, we got this kind of shorter answer. Now, if I ask the same question, we should get that long form answer. Yeah, so we get the long form answer with the link. And I can make these clickable links as well, very easily. So now when I review that answer, let's say, oh, I forgot, I want to make that a clickable link. I just go down and we make it super easy. You just highlight it, make it a link, save it. Let's do it again. I'm going to ask it, is climate change a hoax? Just to show you some different wording. I get my same answer, and then we've got it. So hopefully that shows you a little bit about the workflow of like tweaking the answers a little bit, or that you would want to use the playground. And again, this has been a great project for interns, is to have them, or we had our 8th grade test class doing this, of testing it out and asking questions in lots of different ways and seeing how the bot responded. So that gives you an opportunity to tweak the language if you feel like the answer, it's not that it's incorrect, but you want it to be a little bit different.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna switch things up. It's the last session of the day. Thank you all for sticking it out. I mean, everybody wants to get to dinner and be done with the day. You start out in the morning with all this ambition. I'm gonna go to every session, fill my brain with him, and then after lunch, you're like, not so much. I'm gonna take Sarah's job from her, try to do this all by myself. I feel like I'm 3 years old. I can do it by myself. So I think the next thing that we want to do is provide the call to action. So creating content and putting content in, as you've seen, pays dividends. Sorry, I had to go get water so you guys didn't think I was dying of COVID. You just swallow wrong in the wrong time and people run away from you. I am working on, this was a sort of a last minute thing. We thought, well, we could get all of the ESIP fellows to help us collect information throughout the week for all the collaboration areas. And then at the end of the week, you would be able to see the results of this. You'd be able to punch at the page, this test page. And unfortunately, I updated the slides there, but the slide didn't update here because it's a separate copy. But I have the address to the chat atlas. I'm trying to figure out how to disseminate it, because if I do it on Twitter, that means that the whole world gets it.
I can put it in the chat. I can copy it in here.
You can, yeah, but that's good for the online people, but I don't think everybody here is going to be able to see that. So, I do have a way of doing that. Hang on.
Also, just
This is going to be a
to,
technology switch.
somebody had mentioned earlier, oh, well, this is, product, the license. We offer a free tier. You can just go and sign up and play around with it. So I'll put that, or if you just go to voiceatlas.com, you can, sign up and play around with it and test it out.
Oh, I don't have the sharing. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We can go back to the same. Oh, you got it. There it is. So there it is. So we want to, by the end of the week, be able to have all the collaboration areas with all the information in a Google form. I will take care of transferring that out and getting it into the test page, and then we can just have a ball with it at the end of the week, and everybody's questions will be answered. What I would like to emphasize at the end of the session is think of this as a paradigm shift, away from creating web content and trying to guess what's in someone else's head, with the added bonus of being able to figure out when you're getting web users in who are asking questions you never thought to answer, but might want to. And so using AI and natural language processing to do this boost the utility of the users. I mean, I think you can imagine the possibilities, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, whatever it ends up being, because this whole new class of users will find the information on your site that may be linked to other things much more usable. And we're just using it, constraining it down to ESIP because that's the website that we all know. So if you're a leader of a collaboration area or know of one, urge them to either update their information on the wiki, or I will send around, that's the chat, not the Google Slides page. And we'll update this information and have it in there. We may end up taking the information that's not updated just to have a full suite of information so we can say that how it would be useful. So thanks for sticking around. Special thanks to Shana for being ill and still fully participating. I'm going to stop sharing now if I can.
Yeah, and the saddest thing for me in not being able to be there in person is to be able to have all the follow-up conversations after the session. So for everybody who asked questions and interacted, thank you. Please reach out to me. I'd love to continue the conversation and brainstorm use cases, tell you more about it. Steve has all my contact information. And of course, it's in the ESIP. I can't remember the name of the technology, but it's
in SCAD. It's in SCAD. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
And also thanks to all the ESIP fellows who are here, especially Sarah and Daniel, who held down the Fort Michael online. And pace yourself throughout the meeting. If you have questions, send an email to Sarah, catch me in the hallway or at another session. And thanks. Have a great evening. Yeah, and she can see you, so you can wave.
Thank you, everybody. Stay healthy.